Something weird is happening in the Mississippi River. The carp numbers are dropping, and nobody can figure out why. Now, if you've spent any time following the invasive species saga that has been playing out in America's greatest river system, you know that sentence should be impossible. Invasive carp, chief among them the silver carp, have turned parts of the Mississippi into their personal all-you-can-eat buffet, comprising up to 90% of the fish biomass in some stretches. 90%. That's not a takeover. That's an occupation. And yet here we are, watching the numbers fall, and the first suspect everyone pointed to was a prehistoric-looking river monster called the Longnose gare. Spoiler, they were wrong, but we'll get to that. First, you need to understand just how bad this carp problem actually got. Bighead, silver, grass, and black carp were brought to the United States in the 1970s as a biological control for plants, algae, and snails in aquaculture and wastewater ponds. During high water events, a few fish escaped from contained systems and became established in the lower and middle Mississippi River. A few fish, that's all it took. Nature did the rest, and nature, in this case, was absolutely ruthless. Silver carp have rapid growth rates and high fecundity, and their tendency to invade often perturbs entire aquatic food webs. They are not picky eaters. They are not slow breeders. They are not easy to catch. They are, by almost every measure, the perfect invasive species, and the Mississippi had no answer for them. Populations expanded further to include the Ohio, Missouri, and Illinois rivers. And if you think of fish quietly eating plankton in a muddy river, doesn't sound that scary. Consider this. Silver carp are known for leaping out of the water at the sound of passing boats. The fish can weigh anywhere from 20 to 80 pounds and do serious damage to people and property. Picture a 40-pound torpedo launching itself at your face while you're just trying to fish. That's Tuesday on the Illinois River. The economic damage is just as violent. Local fishing industries, once a mainstay of river communities, lose an estimated $1 billion annually. Worse, the carp threaten to breach the Great Lakes, where they could devastate a $7 billion fishery. Millions of dollars a year are spent on the construction of electric barriers to keep carp from invading the Great Lakes from the Mississippi River. Electric barriers in a river. America is literally electrocuting its own waterways trying to stop these things, and it still might not be enough. The invasion of silver carp in the upper Mississippi River system provides a unique opportunity to assess the influence of this invasive species on native fishes, because a highly standardized long-term monitoring program has been sampling fish communities in 6 reaches for over 20 years. Researchers analyzed fish abundance data collected from 1994 to 2013 from 3 reaches where silver carp populations had been established since 2000 and 3 reaches where they were not established. The results were grim. Infested areas saw significant declines in sport fish species, while the uninfested reaches actually saw sport fish population increases. So the carp weren't just annoying. They were actively dismantling the river's native ecosystem, pool by pool, mile by mile. This is the backdrop. This is what made the mystery so exciting and so confusing when the numbers started dropping. Here's where it gets interesting. Biologists and managers started noticing something they hadn't planned for. In certain stretches of the Mississippi and its tributaries, invasive carp populations weren't just holding steady. They were declining. And the first creature to get credit, the one that got all the headlines, all the conservation hype, all the comeback narrative was the longnose gar. Longnose gar are native to much of the central and eastern United States, primarily occurring in southern Minnesota's larger rivers, the Mississippi, the St. Croix, the Minnesota, and some of their tributaries. They look like something that crawled out of the Jurassic period, all needle snout and armored scales, and they are absolutely built to hunt. Adults are largely solitary predators, their diets primarily composed of fish. They are known for feeding heavily on young carp. Young carp. That phrase started turning heads in conservation circles. If gar eat young carp and gar populations are recovering, could the gar be responsible for hammering carp recruitment? The narrative practically wrote itself. An Associated Press story published in July 2016 was entitled, "Huge, Once Hated Fish, Now Seen as a Weapon Against Invasive Carp." All of a sudden, gar were in the spotlight, and the press was all positive. Alligator gar were once demonized and subjected to extermination efforts, but for more than a decade, state and federal agencies had been working to restore gar in certain areas. Suddenly, the same fish that people used to shoot on sight was being hailed as a biological savior. It's a great story. The misunderstood monster redeemed. The villain becomes the hero. There's just one problem. The carp numbers kept falling in areas where gar populations hadn't meaningfully recovered. That should have been impossible. If gar were the engine driving the decline, you'd expect the decline to track with gar presence. It didn't. Researchers started asking uncomfortable questions. They started looking at other suspects. Here's your moment to weigh in, because this is genuinely one of those cases where the obvious answer and the right answer are two completely different things. If you were a fisheries biologist staring at falling carp numbers in a gar-free stretch of river, what would your first alternative hypothesis be? A disease wiping out the population, or a different native predator nobody was watching closely enough? Comment your answer below, because the real answer is going to surprise you either way. So let's talk about what was actually happening beneath the surface, literally. Several predators native to Midwestern rivers, including short-nosed gar, white bass, black crappie, channel catfish, smallmouth bass, largemouth bass, white crappie, yellow perch, flathead catfish, freshwater drum, and yellow bass, are known to consume young-of-the-year silver carp. That is a long list. And buried in the middle of it, hiding in plain sight, is a fish that every angler in America knows, the largemouth bass. Although largemouth bass co-occur with silver carp, an abundant native predatory fish, their predator-prey relationship was poorly understood. This potential relationship warrants investigation, as largemouth bass are large-gaped predators capable of exhibiting top-down control on planktivorous fishes. Top-down control. That's the scientific way of saying one predator can single-handedly regulate an entire prey population from above. It's the ecological equivalent of one really effective bouncer keeping a crowd in line. Researchers went to work. Largemouth bass were collected from the LaGrange Pool of the Illinois River using electrofishing, and their diets were analyzed. Evidence of silver carp was present in 18% of diets of largemouth bass that consumed fish. 18%. In a river absolutely packed with other prey options, shad, bluegill, golden shiner, 1 in 5 largemouth bass that had eaten a fish had eaten a silver carp. The bass weren't just occasionally stumbling onto carp, they were actively, repeatedly targeting them. Silver carp's rapid growth potential allows them to quickly outgrow predation risk from native predators. But the window, when they are small and vulnerable, the largemouth bass owns that window entirely. And here is where the story gets even richer, because the largemouth bass wasn't working alone. Researchers examining population collapses in the upper Mississippi River system examined several hypotheses to explain declines: boom-bust population dynamics, suppression by native predators, resource exhaustion, improvements in environmental conditions, and disease. Disease. That word showed up in the data too. The observed trends appeared to be most consistent with the hypothesis that disease was the most important factor contributing to the collapse, at least in common carp populations that had already undergone dramatic boom-bust cycles. The river, it turns out, has more than one way to fight back. And then there's the environment itself. Dead carp along the Mississippi River are largely due to warm water and low oxygen levels in shallow areas. Introduced silver and bighead carp are more affected by the warm water die-off than local fish populations. Think about that for a second. The very river these fish invaded, the river they dominated, the river they reshaped, is now literally cooking them. Summer heat, low oxygen, shallow backwaters, summer heat, and lower river stages are concentrating fish in shallow backwaters where oxygen levels drop. Introduced carp are less able to withstand those conditions than local fish populations. The native fish spent thousands of years adapting to this river's moods. The invaders did not, and the river is collecting its debt. So here's the full picture, the real answer to the mystery. The longnose gar deserves credit. It does eat young carp, and its recovery matters. But it was never the whole story. The real driver of declining invasive carp numbers in the Mississippi system is a coalition of forces that nobody bothered to put together until the data forced them to. Largemouth bass, quietly decimating juvenile populations. Native predators across more than a dozen species collectively chipping away at recruitment. Disease cycling through overcrowded populations that burn through their food supply too fast. And the river itself, heat, oxygen depletion, the brutal physics of a system that was never theirs to begin with, turning the environment into a weapon. The reality is that gar will be one more predator taking advantage of invasive carp, but will not be the silver bullet that wins the war against carp. No single species is. The Mississippi River doesn't have a silver bullet, it has an army. And that army has been quietly fighting back this whole time. We just weren't watching the right soldiers. This is what makes invasive species management so humbling and so endlessly fascinating. We spend billions of dollars, build electric barriers, run commercial fishing operations, fund decades of research, and the river does something we didn't plan, through mechanisms we almost missed, driven by a bass that every weekend angler catches without a second thought. Nature is not waiting for us to figure it out. It is already working. Our job is to stop getting in the way. If this story blew your mind even a little, and honestly, it should, hit that subscribe button, because we are just getting started on the wildest ecological mysteries hiding in plain sight across America's waterways. The river has more secrets. We are going to find every single one of them.